Lone truck driver discovers elderly woman trapped in cage with an enormous python. His amazing moral dilemma. Jack had always been a man of the road, the hum of the tires a second heartbeat. At 52, he was a seasoned truck driver, entrusted with cargo across the vast, sun-soaked highways of Texas. But with every mile he drove, he also distanced himself from the family he once cherished. Last year, around Thanksgiving, his wife's voice crackled over the phone, tinged with both love and disappointment. His children had grown used to his absence, their childhood photos growing dusty in the corners of their home, mere echoes of laughter turned to silences. Today, pulling into a lonely gas station, he felt that heaviness, an ache that twisted in his gut. As he filled the tank, the urge to call home fluttered through him, but guilt squashed it down again. They needed the money. He was doing this for them. Yet, standing there, staring at the cracked pavement, rusted signage, and a barren land stretching endlessly, loneliness flooded in. His hands trembled, squeezing the fuel nozzle, all his sacrifice somehow leading him to feel even more isolated. A weak, haunting cry broke through his scattered thoughts, yanking him from his spiraling emotions. Against better judgment, he followed the sound, heading towards a shed hidden behind the station where shadows danced beneath the creeping dusk. Inside, a shocking discovery awaited him. An elderly woman named Betty, frail and fearful, trapped inside a rusting cage. A massive python wrapped around her, its scales glimmering menacingly. Panic hungry in his throat, Jack's instinct screamed to run. But Betty's eyes, wide and pleading, seized his heart. "Please, help me," she croaked, the urgency in her voice stirring memories of his daughter's innocent pleas, the way she begged him for time, for presence. Now, he was standing in front of someone who needed saving, and the weight of his own failure closed in around him. "I can't stay here. I can't breathe." Her words became a terrifying mirror to his own stifled regrets. Jack felt the truth seep in, a visceral clenching of his gut. He was standing at a crossroads. He could just walk away, keep driving, and stay focused on what he thought was his responsibility, provide for his family. But something deeper was gnawing at him, louder than the roaring engine outside. Something that yearned for action, for bravery he'd let go. Each memory of laughter and love only intensified his turmoil. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Jack's pulse quickened. The python tightened its coils, a physical representation of the life suffocating him. Could he risk it all? He looked at Betty, who needed him to act, not just for her, but for his own redemption. The moment was heavy with indecision. He could confront the predators of his own life, the trafficker lurking at the edges of this nightmare, or drive home a tired man, ultimately still alone. In that electrifying moment of realization, he had to decide. Was it worth plunging back into danger to save a stranger, risking everything he had left? As the din of approaching footsteps echoed ominously, Jack's breath turned shallow, the choice looming larger than anything he'd ever faced before. What if, in saving her, he found the way back to himself? But what if he didn't make it out alive? Would this fleeting moment grant him the courage he needed? The python tightened its grip, the stakes now impossibly high. Heart raced, Jack's mind spun like the wheels of his truck drifting on a long, winding road. The footsteps grew louder. Urgency screamed for action, a call that questioned his will to stand idly by. In that confined space, an eternity stretched with the python's grip, a vivid embodiment of his life, choked by the choices made over years of neglect. His hands, clammy and unsteady, hovered above the cage, caught in the gravitational pull of a decision that would juxtapose duty against morality. "Please, I can't breathe." Betty's voice cracked through the haze of his fears, forcing his attention back to her desperate state. Each syllable resonated with painful clarity, reminding him of the pleas he'd silenced, like his daughter's tear-stained face when he chose work over family. That haunting imagery clawed at him. Would he allow another soul to suffocate under the weight of neglect like his own kin? Gripping the rusted bars of the cage, he could feel the metal freeze against his sweaty palms. The python was a predator, true, but Jack realized he had become one too. A predator of moments, memories, lost to the roar of an engine. Every decision he'd made, every mile he'd driven, had led to this singular moment where he could change. It wasn't about the money, the long hauls, or the fleeting conversations from the cab of his truck. It was about courage, something he thought he'd discarded along with his family. With adrenaline roaring in his veins and doubt simmering, he formed a rudimentary plan to distract the snake before confronting it. Scanning the shed, he noticed an old broom leaning against the wall, its bristles worn but sturdy. Jack knew that if he were to act, it had to be with intention, not impulsiveness. He'd have to lure the python away from Betty, giving him enough time to free her. Each precious second counted. His thoughts shouted back at him. What if the snake struck? He felt the creeping chill of fear coiled tighter than the python's embrace. But somewhere beneath that fear was a flicker of resolve. It whispered that his current existence could not overshadow this chance for redemption. With practiced determination, he moved toward the broom, a tool not just for the cage-breaking act, but a symbol of his resolve to face the instincts he'd long ignored. Taking a deep breath, Jack readied himself. Every action now had to be deliberate. He swiped the broom toward the python, tapping the floor first to draw its attention, making sure to create enough distance for Betty's escape. The python lunged instinctively, its massive head snapping towards the unexpected disturbance. Jack's heart thundered in response, mirroring the thumping sounds of impending terror. As he saw Betty's eyes widen, a thought crystallized. She was more than an elderly woman in a cage. She was a reflection of his own internal prison, shackled by years of avoidance. The python released its hold slightly, sensing the shift in focus. This was his moment, his choice. He lunged toward the cage, a primal roar of defiance escaping him. If he could face down this creature of fear, maybe he could confront the haunting shadows in his own life. The python struck in a blur of scales and fangs, its fury palpable. Jack's grip on the broom tightened, adrenaline propelling him forward. He swung the broom, feeling the raw energy surge through him as it connected with the creature. He had to push through the pain of his past and the fear of his future. Was he willing to withstand this for a chance to breathe free again? But even as he fought, doubts gnawed at the corners of his mind. Would this act save him as much as it would save Betty? Would he genuinely find a way back to the life he so desperately wanted, regardless of the outcome? He could feel the stakes rising. The python was no longer just a creature to fear. It had become representative of everything he needed to conquer, the duality of his existence and the chances he had to take. With a battle cry fueled by desperation, Jack faced the python. The time had come to confront not just the creature coiling around Betty, but the very shadows of himself he had long avoided. Would this moment of bravery lead him somewhere he needed to go? Or would it seal his fate? In that reckoning stood the potential to redefine himself, but the outcome remained uncertain. As the chaos of the struggle played out, Jack found himself wrestling not only with the python, but the ghosts of his choices. Would he free them all, or would he end up lost in his own device? The answer was unwritten. Future and past colliding in a moment that felt larger than life itself. Would he finally have the courage to grasp at the strands of hope he thought were gone forever? Jack's world narrowed to a singular point where the broom met the python's scales. His mind screamed in the chaos, the primal sounds of combat echoing in the cramped shed, reverberating off the walls like a battle cry. Ignoring the blood pumping in his ears, he focused on the creature's darting movements, weaving through its strikes as he fought not just for Betty's safety, but his own redemption. Every swing of the broom sent shockwaves of resolve coursing through him. The python, startled but not deterred, recoiled and struck again, but this time Jack anticipated the attack. In that split-second decision, he ducked, feeling the whoosh of the body passing mere inches above him. A surge of confidence ignited. He was no longer just an observer in his own life. He had actively chosen to fight. In the scuffle, the loss of years spent in emotional paralysis struck him sharply. Years he now understood had been squandered, invested in machinery, schedules, and the echo of engine roars rather than loved ones. Betty gasped again, her voice cutting through the din. "Please, Jack, I trust you." Her words were a lifeline, grounding her to the urgency of the present. In her plea, he felt both the weight of responsibility and a flicker of hope ignite. It was a simple yet profound realization. Trust could shift the course of events. It was something he had neglected to establish in his relationships, at work, with his daughter, with himself. Gritting his teeth, he swung the broom again with newfound determination. The python coiled back, sensing fear in Jack's motions, and for a brief moment, the tension in the shed dissipated as they faced each other in a standoff. Time slowed. Jack's heart synced with the rhythm of his breathing, a steady pulse against the chaos surrounding him. He questioned himself. How had he let fear shape his life for so long? The realization was steep, but in that clarity, a solemn vow took root. He would no longer let fear dictate his choices. With a fierce roar, he charged forward, sending the broom crashing towards the python's head. The impact shook through him, shifting the power dynamic. The snake recoiled and repositioned, and in this fleeting moment, he saw the clearest path to Betty. The lock on her cage had become his target. Was it truly fear of failure, or simply the horror of realization that had handcuffed him, rendering him immobile? No longer. It was now or never. He dove for the lock, his hands fumbling but resolute. The noise of the struggle seemed to fade as he grappled with the mechanism. The metal felt alive, a symbol of his choices binding him over the years. He forced the thoughts away, focusing on the here and now. Betty's trust burned in his mind, and instinct kicked in as he twisted the lock open with a decisive click. "Now!" he shouted, urging Betty to crawl out as he braced for an imminent backlash. The python, sensing its prey escaping, lashed out in a final desperate attempt to reclaim what it had almost owned. Jack's heart raced once more. Fear coiled tighter, but he fought back the instinct to retreat. Instead, he stood firm, brandishing the broom like a sword, ready to defend. As Betty squeezed through the narrow gap, a sense of exhilaration washed over him. Could this be the turning point? Each breath felt sharper with the promise of release, a tangible taste of liberation from burdens that had clouded his spirit for so long. Yet, just as Betty emerged, the python, sensing a shifting tide, struck again. Jack's instincts kicked in. He swung the broom one last time, striking the creature hard, pushing it back long enough for her to escape. Betty's startled eyes met his, the fear replaced by gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling, both from relief and an acknowledgement of the profound change that had unfolded in that cramped space. But Jack had not yet found his anchor. The battle wasn't won. The python writhed in anger, still a threat, and now a chilling reminder of his unresolved conflicts. But what he didn't know as he stood there, broom clutched tightly in hand, was that this confrontation would not just redefine his sense of courage, it would lead him to confront something darker. a shadow that loomed even larger than the python, a challenge that awaited him outside the shed. Would facing this creature of fear finally unlock a journey towards self-discovery? Or would it unleash even deeper wells of unresolved pain he had yet to acknowledge? The python writhed in frustration, its heavy coils crashing against the ground as Jack maintained his stance, broom poised and ready. Time felt suspended in that cramped shed, thick with the tension of recent survival and the lingering shadows of his past. While Betty emerged, shaken but safe, he felt a conflicting surge of triumph and trepidation. He had fought the python, yes, but the battle had only just begun. With the immediate danger momentarily subdued, Jack's mind began racing through the implications of what had just happened. The victory illuminated the layers of his fear. He had identified the python's threat, but he also recognized how long he had let the weight of his inner turmoil keep him ensnared. It wasn't just the snake he had fought. It was the internal mechanisms of procrastination, self-doubt, and fear that he had allowed to dictate his choices for far too long. "Jack," Betty's voice penetrated the fog of his thoughts, "we have to get out of here." "Right," he replied, but his voice betrayed a hint of hesitation. While Betty was free, his instincts still urged him to linger, a part of him compelled to sort through the chaos before him. Papery sheets of dust began to settle over the room, remnants of neglect and despair. He hesitated, caught in a moment of self-reckoning. How often had he retreated to comfort over facing the chaos in his life? Urgency pulled at him, and he stepped purposefully towards the door. Yet he glanced back at the python, beginning to coil defensively. Its agitated movements mirrored the restlessness in Jack's heart. Was this creature just a manifestation of something deeper within him, a symbol of these unresolved conflicts gnawing at his spirit? Then it struck him like a lightning bolt. Dangerous obstacles had often intimidated him into inaction, blocking paths he never thought he could traverse. But here, in this moment, he felt expansive possibilities stirring within him, a realization that perhaps he could confront more than just physical danger. "Let's go, Betty," he said, voice resolute. The simple command held the weight of uncharted territory. It was time to take control. They stumbled out of the shed, a potent mix of anxiety and excitement coursing through him, an adrenaline rush fueled by personal awakening. But stepping outside, the open air felt heavier somehow. The remnants of the python's chaos lingered in his mind. Would facing that creature unleash a torrent of suppressed fears or teach him to harness the strength he had unearthed? Was he truly prepared to confront the deeper shadows that lurked beyond the shed's safety? The road before him widened, revealing endless possibilities. Betty, now at his side, looked at him with a careful mix of hope and uncertainty. "Thank you for saving me, but I can sense something isn't over yet for you." Jack swallowed hard, searching for words that wouldn't come. He wasn't sure if he was ready to share the weight of his doubts, yet his journey had begun with a choice, one that needed to flourish beyond the shallow fringes of fear. This awareness urged him to forge a new path, one tangled with the complexities of vulnerability, but also shimmering with the potential for growth. "Right, we can't stay here. I'll figure it out," he finally said, offering a tentative smile. They stepped forward, leaving the shed behind, but Jack felt an unwavering tension building within him, a reflection of the ultimate battle yet to unfold. As they continued onward, Jack couldn't shake the nagging thought that something greater awaited him, something far more powerful than any serpent he had faced. The shadows of his past loomed large. Was he ready to confront not just what had trapped Betty, but what had ensnared him all along? Every step was now an invocation towards self-discovery, and with each heartbeat, a new realization burgeoned. His fight wasn't just against external threats, it was to reclaim his own destiny. The moment had arrived for him to confront the deepest instincts that bound him. And yet, looming just ahead, he caught sight of a figure in the distance. The tension coiled tighter in his chest. Who or what was this? Would it provide the closure he sought, or unleash yet another battle he had not anticipated? He could only hope that stepping forward wouldn't lead him into darkness, but into the light of understanding. Jack's heart raced as he instinctively stepped closer to the figure in the distance. The sunlight glinted off something metallic, and as they approached, he realized it was an elderly woman trapped within some translucent cage. The sight jolted him from his daze. She was grimacing, holding her arm awkwardly pressed against the structure, as if paralyzed by fear or pain. Betty paused beside him, her expression a mixture of horror and empathy. "What do we do?" she whispered, uncertainty choking her voice. Jack felt the grip of indecision tighten around his throat as he scanned the immediate area for threats. The python's defiance still echoed in his mind, feeding his anxiety. Could this situation lead him directly into another confrontation, or was this a chance to demonstrate strength and vulnerability? "Stay here," Jack ordered quietly. He advanced cautiously, his mind racing through the consequences of each potential action. The urge to spring into action warred with the fear of failure. The stark reality of how often he had avoided stepping out of his comfort zone loomed large yet again. "Please help me," the woman's voice trembled with desperation. Hearing it ignited a flicker of determination within him. Confronting this moment would mean grappling not only with the physical cage, but also with what it represented in his life. The cages of expectation, fear, and self-imposed limitations. Taking a breath, he stepped closer, examining the mechanism that bound her. The cage appeared ornate, yet twisted, with riveted metal that appeared difficult even for an experienced mechanic to dismantle. He could almost see reflections of his own struggles in the cage's intricate design, complex, tangled, yet so very human. "Hold on, I'm coming," Jack called out, his voice steadier than he felt. He knelt next to the cage, feeling the weight of her pain and his own inhibitions converge. Again, the battle wasn't just against an external threat, it was against the self-doubt that murmured warnings of inadequacy. He scanned the periphery of the cage, searching for weak points. The metal was old yet surprisingly resilient. Rummaging through his pockets, he found a small screwdriver, one he had long since forgotten about but had kept for emergencies. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. "Listen carefully," he said, turning toward the woman. "I'm going to try to open this, but I need you to stay calm. Can you do that?" She nodded vigorously while tears glistened in her eyes. The trust she placed in him filled him with fortitude. He realized that overcoming fear didn't just mean defeating tangible dangers. It meant engaging with human vulnerability, extending beyond his own comfort zones and pushing through the barriers that had restrained him for too long. As he began to work on the lock, Jack's mind raced to the parallels between rescuing the woman and his personal struggles. Was he truly prepared to dismantle the constraining beliefs that bound him as firmly as the woman was trapped? The soft click of metal gave way to a spark of hope. The thought that he could help her could, in turn, help him. The lock finally gave. As the door creaked open, the light flooded into the cage. The woman gasped and clutched his arm, her face a mix of gratitude and relief. Jack felt a wave of emotional release wash over him. He was not just helping another, he was embracing his own journey of liberation. "Thank you, you saved me," she breathed, stepping gingerly out of the cage and into freedom. But as Jack stepped back, another shadow stirred behind them. His heart sunk as he recognized the silhouette. The python's massive body glided silently toward them from behind, its eyes fixed with venomous intent. Jack's pulse quickened. This was the moment he had been anticipating, yet dreading. Here stood the embodiment of his fears, and it was time for him to reclaim not just the woman's freedom, but his own. "Jack," Betty called out, her voice laced with panic. "What are you going to do?" Faced with this imminent danger, he could feel the weight of all his decisions teetering on the edge. He had come so far, but was he ready to confront the monster of his insecurities one last time? The confrontation had arrived, and with it, the question that would redefine him. Would he fight, or would he retreat once more into the shadows of his past? The python coiled ominously, its scales glistening like polished armor. But Jack felt an unexpected calmness thread its way through his racing heart. The woman stood beside him, her freedom a fragile shimmer amid the scene. He realized this moment wasn't merely about survival. It was a test of all he had learned thus far. "Jack, what are you waiting for?" Betty's urgent voice cut through the charged stillness, bringing him back to the present. He had a choice to make, and every instinct told him to retreat. But retreating meant stumbling back into the shadows of his life, where self-doubt reigned supreme. Not only had he freed the woman, but he also had the chance to break his own chains. Jack's thoughts whirled. What would he do? Flee? Face the snake? The mere idea of turning tail felt like a betrayal, not just to himself, but to the woman who had just tasted liberation. He clenched the screwdriver in his fist, a small tool representing a burgeoning strength he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. "Listen, the python is just another fear," he muttered, more to himself than to the others. "I've been running for years." With newfound resolve coursing through him, he considered his options. He could use the boulder to his right as a barrier, something to put between the python and the vulnerable woman. He could distract the creature, lead it away. "Betty, get ready to run if it comes after me," he instructed, his voice steady, betraying none of the tumult within him. She nodded, eyes wide but shimmering with trust. Jack turned, focusing on the advancing serpent. Its eyes, cold and calculating, mirrored the confusion and anger he had spent years suppressing. Would this be another escape route, or an opportunity to confront the fear that had gripped him for so long? "Hey, over here!" he shouted, waving his arms in an attempt to direct the python's attention. The creature paused, the tension in the air swirling like charged particles. "Come on, you lumbering beast!" The python flicked its tongue, tasting the air. Jack's heart pounded as it started toward him, each movement deliberate and menacing. He had stepped out of the cage. Now it was time to confront the larger beast standing before him. Jack planned his next move carefully. If he could distract the python for just a moment, he could allow the elderly woman time to escape to safety. Channeling all his angst into courage, he took a few steps back and raised the screwdriver, ready to defend himself. "I am not afraid of you!" he shouted, a realization dawning that this wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a psychological battle. The python lunged, powerful and swift. Jack sidestepped and hurled the screwdriver toward a nearby bush, causing a faint rustling sound. The python hesitated, giving Jack a split second to position himself. "Go!" he shouted at the woman, urging her toward a nearby path away from the python. She hesitated for a moment, gauging his resolve, but then ran, propelled by instinct and faith in a stranger. As she dashed away, Jack faced the serpent fully, his breath steadying. He saw not just a predator, but the embodiment of every fear and crippling doubt that had marred his life. It was time to confront the embodiment of his insecurities head-on. Owning his fear would mean claiming his identity, stepping into the man he had always yearned to be. The python recoiled for a moment, assessing the threat before it. Jack's heart swelled with bravery. He wasn't in a cage anymore. This was his fight. But just as the confrontation seemed imminent, a distant rumbling echoed through the air. A truck engine, heavy and approaching, slicing through the deafening tension. A new wave of uncertainty enveloped him. Would rescue come and sweep away his moment of truth? Or would he have to face whatever lay ahead alone? "Jack," Betty's voice called again, filled with urgency. "What's happening?" The answer lay not just in the approaching truck, but in his ability to redefine this moment, to elevate himself beyond carelessness and indecision. In that split second, he understood. This was not just about fighting the python. It was about learning to navigate the maze of life itself. His destiny hung in the balance, stacked against years of fear and avoidance. But facing the truths of his own existence was just beginning. What awaited him as he stepped forward would define everything he was and everything he hoped to become. The python recoiled for a moment, assessing the threat before it. Jack's heart swelled with bravery. He wasn't in a cage anymore. This was his fight. But just as the confrontation seemed imminent, a distant rumbling echoed through the air. A truck engine, heavy and approaching, slicing through the deafening tension. A new wave of uncertainty enveloped him. Would rescue come and sweep away his moment of truth? Or would he have to face whatever lay ahead alone? "Jack!" Betty's voice called again, filled with urgency. "What's happening?" The answer lay not just in the approaching truck, but in his ability to redefine this moment, to elevate himself beyond carelessness and indecision. In that split second, he understood. This was not just about fighting the python. It was about learning to navigate the maze of life itself. His destiny hung in the balance, stacked against years of fear and avoidance. But facing the truths of his own existence was just beginning. What awaited him as he stepped forward would define everything he was and everything he hoped to become. The sound of the truck's engine grew louder, its heavy rumble mingling with the beat of Jack's heart as he weighed his choices. The chaos of the moment contrasted sharply with the world he had known, one where he felt powerless, shackled by the opinions of others, constantly moving to avoid conflict. But here, in this wild, raw space, he encountered a different sort of truth. Facing the python extended beyond a mere animal encounter. It was a representation of all the shadows he had carried within. Jack clenched his fists, each pulse of adrenaline heightening his focus. The python loomed closer, muscles rippling beneath its scales. But this creature became less about terror and more about the struggle he'd battled internally for far too long. He could see not just the snake, but also the fear of failure, the fear of facing oneself that had gripped him throughout his life. "Come on then," he challenged, the words breaking free like a claw tearing through layers of doubt. He backpedaled from the advancing serpent, wielding the screwdriver for protection, but also as a symbol of his new resolve. The truck's arrival, while a potential distraction, could also mean salvation. But would he relinquish his moment of truth for the sake of safety? An instinct stirred within him, igniting a flame he had long buried under self-criticism. "I need to finish this," he thought, pushing through the knot of anxiety in his stomach. Regardless of whether the truck came to his aid or not, he had a responsibility now, not just to the woman he had freed, but to himself. The python, sensing his fearlessness, hesitated, flicking its forked tongue as if weighing its next move. Jack recognized this standoff for what it was, a pivotal choice. He could retreat into complacency or surge forward into the unknown. Suddenly, inspiration struck him. What if I could turn this confrontation into something else? What if, instead of a predator-prey dynamic, I could shift the balance? He recalled the moments spent in self-doubt during his earlier days. Those conversations echoing with accusations and judgments from his peers. But now, here, the python was simply an extension of himself, a physical manifestation of the threats that had once harnessed him. With a deep breath, Jack yelled louder, "You don't own me!" This proclamation startled the python, and Jack seized the opportunity. He inched closer, positioning himself purposefully between the creature and the path to freedom that the woman had taken. "Let's see how you handle this." Jack crouched low, channeling his focus. He threw stones with calculated precision toward a nearby thicket. The python snapped its head in that direction, perhaps wondering if a more immediate threat had emerged. It was confusion, a change in energy, and with that, Jack took advantage of its distraction, stepping boldly toward the creature. In that moment, he realized that the battle was never just physical. It was deeply psychological, an ongoing conversation with himself about bravery, identity, and worth. "You're here, Jack. You faced the worst, and you're still standing," he reassured, mustering strength he didn't know he possessed. The truck finally pulled into view, its horn blaring, yet Jack remains resolute in his stance. He had navigated far too many roads of fear without direction. Now was his moment to remap his journey. The python snapped back toward him, jaws open, but instead of fear, Jack felt a surge of clarity. This would be a transformative moment. But then, from the truck, a voice cut through the tension. "Jack, get back! I'll handle this!" It was a seasoned truck driver, the voice booming with authority. Yet Jack knew in the echo of the moment that this was his fight. The fear shifted again, morphing into determination. "What if I don't step away?" he questioned internally, staring into the icy, shimmering eyes of the python. It was a choice, one that would ripple through his life. Jack stood firm. This wasn't just about survival, it was the initiation he needed. He had averted the shadows before, but now curiosity pulled him deeper. "How do you want to be defined, Jack?" The answer loomed ahead, framing the new chapter of his life. Each second hung heavy with possibility, and yet the python was not his only challenge. The moment of confrontation had arrived, but on the other side of that moment, a revelation awaited. A decision that would redefine Jack's existence. Could he truly wrestle control of his life? As he squared off against the serpent and the voice of the truck driver faded into the backdrop, he felt the shifting tides of empowerment and uncertainty, all converging toward a singular, unavoidable moment. Jack's heart raced, not from fear, but from the thrill of potential. His destiny hung in the balance, and it was up to him to seize it. Would he emerge as the man he had always dreamt of being, or would he fall back into old patterns? In the glaring eyes of the python, the unraveling of his past became clearer, and he braced himself for the uncharted waters of the future. The time had come to face both the serpent and the confines of his existence. The python coiled tightly, gauging Jack's movements, its eyes reflecting the tension that hung between them. Jack took a step forward, his resolve hardening. Every setback, every moment of hesitation seemed to converge into this singular confrontation, reminding him of everything he'd learned through struggle. This was not just about him facing down a snake. It was about dismantling the chains of his past failures and fears. "Come on, Jack," he whispered to himself, his focus narrowing like a camera lens. "You can redefine what this means." His heart pounded, but each beat fueled his determination rather than cowering it. He had let others dictate how he should feel, how he should act. Never again. The python shifted in response to Jack's audacity, its sleek body undulating, and for the first time, he perceived its power not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity for enlightenment. Each flick of its tongue reminded him of the second-guessing thoughts that clawed at his mind. How many times had he held back from opportunities because he feared failure, or because someone else's doubt loomed larger than his own aspirations? Jack threw another stone towards the thicket, emphasizing his strategy. The python jerked, its attention momentarily caught in the chaos of unexpected sound. This was more than a distraction. It was a test of his courage and an invitation to embrace action rather than retreat. He had begun to understand the shifting symbiosis of power dynamics within this encounter. He crushed the screwdriver in his grip, a tangible reminder of his potential. "You're not just a tool anymore. You're a part of my evolution," he thought, casting a glance at the truck. The driver was still shouting, but to Jack, the The man's voice was a distant echo, underscored by the loud thrumming of his heart. As the python shifted again, revealing its magnificent length, Jack recognized a striking parallel to his own situation. Both groaned beneath the weight of misjudgment and past wounds. There was an unspoken truth in the air. The python only mirrored what Jack had faced inside all these years. The fear, the paralysis, the reluctance to take risks. This creature encapsulated all he was fighting against. "What are you gonna do?" Jack questioned himself, his fingers trembling with the rush of realization. This was not a matter of overpowering a beast. It was about embracing the aspects of himself he had long since buried. What if he faced this encounter with curiosity instead of animosity? Instead of viewing the python purely as a threat, what if he saw it as a teacher? In that moment of introspection, Jack's fear transformed into fierce determination. "I am not defined by my past," he said aloud, voice steady against the roar of uncertainty. It seemed to resonate within the charged atmosphere, a declaration echoing back at him as though it shook the very ground beneath them. "I can choose to evolve." With renewed clarity, Jack took another step forward, eyes locked onto the pythons. However, as he poised to engage deeper, he felt a tremor beneath his feet. The ground began to shift, a rumbling sound vibrating through the earth, shaking away the last of his apprehensions. Was it the truck? Or had the python revealed a latent side to its nature, one of danger or retreat? But Jack instinctively pushed forward, understanding that he could not let hesitation engulf him yet again. If he could control the narrative of this encounter, then perhaps he could transform not just his life, but also the very fabric of who he was becoming. As the driver continued to yell for him to stand down, Jack smirked and countered the escalating fear. "I'm not stepping back, I'm stepping up." And with that, he pivoted, addressing the python, seeing it not with dread, but with an acute sense of wonder. But just as he was about to embrace this newfound perspective, the python surged forward, its strength irresistible. Jack's heart quickened. This shift could mean the difference between power and powerlessness. One question loomed in his mind as he braced for the unexpected. How far was he willing to go to reclaim his life? Each moment grew heavier with the weight of potential outcomes. What if he was intensely tested in ways he had never anticipated? As Jack confronted the reality of impending action, he was propelled forward, not away from fear, but toward the very heart of discovery. What awaited him at this precipice of transformation? Only the confrontation itself would reveal the true depth of his journey. The python lunged, its powerful muscles rippling as it closed the distance between them. Yet Jack's instinct took charge. He sidestepped just in time, surprising himself with a sudden burst of agility. For years, he had felt stagnant, weighed down by self-doubt. But in this moment, he was discovering the instincts he thought long buried. This confrontation challenged everything he believed about himself. "Think, Jack," he shouted internally amidst the adrenaline rush. The python moved with an elegance that belied its strength, a dance of survival and dominion. Jack's perception of danger began to shift. Each charged moment with the snake embodied new capabilities brewing within him. Fear morphed into an exhilarating game of strategy. With the python on the offensive, Jack considered his next move more carefully. The screwdriver in his hand felt heavier, a weapon, but also a symbol of his past failures and what he feared would undermine his progression. What if I put it down? The thought flickered unbidden. That could be a radical act of trust, an acceptance of his own growth without the crutch of familiar tools. He weighed the consequences. The truck driver's frantic shouts pierced the air, calling for safety measures that felt irrelevant now. Jack realized he was teetering on the brink of something bigger than mere survival. This was about interfacing with an ancient wisdom. The python was not merely a predator, it was a representation of his own conditional reflexes to flee. As the python reeled back, preparing for its next strike, Jack took a breath, grounding himself. "What do you want?" he asked, half in jest and half in sincerity. The question reverberated within him, illuminating a deeper inquiry. What did he truly desire from life? He had let circumstances dictate so many aspects of his reality. Now, faced with an extraordinary challenge, he craved agency. The python's undulating body was not just a threat. It was an invocation. Moving with cautious fluidity, Jack softly articulated his approach. If he could align his movements with a sense of purpose rather than opposition, he might find harmony. He raised the screwdriver not like a weapon, but like an extension of himself, channeling energy rather than hostility. Jack stepped forward again, this time defying the instinct to recoil. He could almost see the logic in the snake's gaze, a reflection of his own journey. What would happen if he defined his path based on strength, not fear? With a rapid flick of the wrist, he threw the screwdriver into the thicket beyond them, letting it clatter away harmlessly. "What do I do now?" he mused, feeling both vulnerable and liberated. His heart raced, not with dread, but exhilaration. The python hesitated, sensing Jack's alteration of attitude. In that heartbeat of stillness, Jack's curiosity transformed into an explosive yearning to understand. He wanted to learn from this creature. Just as he believed he was beginning to master the encounter, the python lunged again. But this time, Jack stood firm. He drew on the resilience he had cultivated over a lifetime, anchoring his stance. "Show me," he urged. "Teach me what I need to know." As the air thickened with uncertainty, Jack felt a magnetic connection to the python, noting every subtle shift in its posture. His sense of determination began to weave into an understanding that rivaled fear. Suddenly, he grasped the reality of the encounter. It was an exchange, not one of dominance, but one of mutual acknowledgement of strength and vulnerability. But just as this epiphany ignited within him, the rumbling below intensified. The earth trembled, cracks appearing underfoot. Jack's heart raced with new apprehension. What was the world around him unraveling for? Before he had time to process the danger, a shadow surged behind the python, ominous and looming. This shift in dynamics demanded his immediate attention. The lesson of this confrontation was only just beginning to reveal itself, and Jack was not yet prepared for the full scope of what awaited him. Would he rise to meet not only the python, but whatever turmoil loomed in the shadows? The stakes soared higher, urging him to redefine the limits of courage. With each moment passing, he asked himself one burning question. Was he ready to confront not just the python, but the fears that lingered in the dark corners of his own life? In the midst of swirling chaos, Jack found clarity as his heart thundered with the realization that he stood at a pivotal juncture. The python loomed before him, but in its gaze, he recognized not just a creature of fear, but an embodiment of every regret and hesitation that had held him captive for years. The shadows of his past began to dissolve, revealing the path he truly yearned to take, the one toward courage, authenticity, and liberation. "Let's finish this," he thought, drawing strength from the core of his being. The world had conditioned him to retreat at the sign of danger, to prioritize caution over valor. But now, Jack embraced the disquiet within. He wouldn't be a passive participant any longer. He would confront the serpent head-on. The earth beneath him trembled, resonating with his resolve to rewrite the narrative of his life. The world outside the engagement dimmed in importance compared to the profound lesson unfolding before him. As he met the truck driver's earnest gaze, Jack felt a spark of conviction. He was no longer the lost man he once was. He had become stronger than any serpent that could threaten him. Suddenly, the python, feeling his energy shift, slithered back slightly, acknowledging Jack's metamorphosis. "I see your strength," it seemed to convey through the earnestness in its eyes. Jack smiled through the uncertainty, witnessing how both he and the python were continuously redefining bravery in a world fixated on fear. With a climactic beat, the python launched forward once more. But this time, Jack saw it coming and twirled aside with confidence. A deep-seated knowledge rose within him. He could navigate this encounter relying on courage rather than avoidance. Every heartbeat resonated with triumph. Indeed, this was his moment of acceptance and transition, a transformation that reached beyond the immediate threat and settled deep within him. No longer shackled by the weight of the past, he forged ahead, embodying the strength he had unearthed through adversity. Jack turned full circle, embracing both the python and the approaching truck with eyes wide open. This journey towards self-actualization had borne fruit, leading him to a place of accountability where he understood that true overcoming was about redeeming the lost time, acknowledging his mistakes, and reclaiming the power of presence in life. In a final act of freedom, he exhaled deeply, releasing both the python and the shadows that had clouded his vision. "You are not my enemy," he declared, the truth of the statement reverberating through the trees and across the open lands. His once stifled spirit soared, filled with gratitude for both the struggle and the epiphany it had brought him. Freedom and growth coalesced, bringing closure to a gamble he hadn't known he was taking. Jack had emerged from the depths of self-doubt, claiming not just his life, but the very essence of who he could become: strong, resilient, present. The truck's approach echoed in the distance, a resounding affirmation of his new path. And as he stood there, surrounded by what used to terrify him, he understood that true fulfillment lay not in winning battles, but in the transformative lesson of embracing life's intricacies. Jack had indeed achieved fulfillment, journeying toward a future brimming with authenticity, awareness, and strength, poised to embrace whatever lay ahead. Now, take a moment. This is your chance to embrace transformation too. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Comment below with your reactions and thoughts on Jack's incredible journey. And please share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel. Don't wait even one more second. Act now!